just a netherport design. This was the exact same mindset I had a month ago when I uploaded this. And at first glance, you can really see why I thought that. This build just really isn't that great, especially if you compare it to all the other ones that came after mine. I mean, when I put them side by side, it just becomes clear as day. But mine became much more successful. And to this day, I still see this build everywhere I go, whether it's Insta, Twitter, Pinterest, and on a PewDiePie video. And not just that, look, it's the funny number. Okay, but the thing that really sparked my interest is that a day after the original Nether Portal post, I actually made another design. However, this build just didn't do as well. In fact, the original post had like at least 1,000 more likes than the second one. A design I spent much more time and efforts on. So that got me thinking, how do you make a build memorable? And more importantly, what's the difference between these two builds? And what makes the first build so much more prevalent? And to answer that question, I think we should take a look at more Nether Portal designs, including a custom one made for you, Felix. Okay, now let's first take a look at these builds. If I were to tell you to replicate one of them into your world, which one would you choose? Well, I think it's pretty safe to say that, most of us would have chosen the guitar, even though the chest piece is smaller and much easier to replicate. But the guitar just looks a lot more approachable and visually appealing. And I think that's all because of the shape of these builds. What do I mean by that? Well, let's do an experiment. Let's take a look at these builds and strip away all the details so that only the basic shape remains. And as you can see, the builds with the strong and clear shapes are just much more identifiable. Like, just by looking at these shapes, we can tell that this is an axe, a sword, and a guitar. However, if you look at these other builds, yeah, sure, maybe you can tell that this is a chest piece or a scissor, but honestly, it just looks more like a penis. But because of these unharmonized shapes, the subject matter of the build just becomes much harder to identify. So as a builder, before building, we need to make sure the shape of a build is instantly recognizable, because a confused viewer isn't going to remember your build. So that raises the question, how do we use shape in a way so that it's visually appealing? And allow me to introduce shape theory. Shape is a crucial element within arts, and you can see it being applied everywhere in your life. For example, look at the cloud outside your window. What does it make you feel? Well, obviously, it looks soft and friendly, even though it's literally just water farts. The cloudy soft vibe it gets is evoked by the round shape possessed by the cloud. Now, remember when you were year 1, your teacher went up to the class and said something along the lines of, "Alright class, this is a circle." And if so, you know these boys. The square, the circle, the triangle, and the weirdo. No one likes the weirdo. But do you know that each one of these shapes evoke a certain emotion? And that, in summary, is shape theory in visual arts. And the basic insight is that everything within our world evokes a specific feeling to you. The cube boys makes you feel solid, strong, and reliable. The round boys makes you feel soft, friendly, and innocent. The triangular boys makes you feel danger, violence, and anxiety. And the weird boys just made something look more interesting. And you can see this shape theory being applied everywhere, especially in Minecraft builds. Because in a world where everything is made of square and sometimes triangle, having a build that resembles any other shape will be memorable. And a good example of that is the Swedish meatball. But that's besides the point. Now looking back at our guitar portal, you can see the amount of round shapes surrounding the portal, and only as it goes away from the portal does the square become more rigid. And the result? For me, the round shape of the build inserts a sense of friendliness and warmth to the build, but a hint of aged feeling is also added by the squares within the build. I mean, to me, just the act of looking at this build makes me want to sit on the petrified chair and listen to the music as the sun sets. There's just a pleasing quality to the build. a quality that calms your mind. But in stark contrast, the PewDiePie ads build is just filled with triangular and sharp edges. It's like screaming violence and strength to me as a viewer. It brings a sense of chaos to the build. But if the ads is primarily circle, the theme and tone of the build would just be completely ruined. A good builder will always think about what shapes to use before building, and this is demonstrated in many build tutorials, because a shape filled with emotions is much more memorable than a bland one. But still, this doesn't explain the sheer memorability of and the popularity of the original build. Why is there so much people mimicking this build idea? Which brings me to the next point. Symbolism. The elemental quality of the build. To explain this, let's take a look at these silhouettes again. Although you can immediately point out what these are, but it doesn't link to the subject matter of the build. Because no matter how much you transform a nether portal, at the end of the day, it will still be a nether portal. And what do you think of when you see a nether portal? Jeez, okay, yeah, that's the feeling. You know, the feeling of adventure, but danger. And what else makes you think of danger? Well, for me, a sword or an axe. The symbol of the sword and the axe creates a connection between the nether and the actual build. And that connection causes our brain to subconsciously connect these two objects together. And if you compare this to something, let's say a guitar, even though the build is well constructed, the connection just isn't there anymore. It's much harder for us to remember what the build is after seeing it once. And if you really think about it, this rule applies to nearly everything iconic within our culture, whether it is a samurai-inspired space wizard or Among Us. Everything that is easily remembered is something that connects with a familiar idea that is tonally similar. Alrighty, I think that's enough of me lecturing you. How about we actually take everything we've learned today and put it into an actual build? And for this build, we're going to make the original nether portal design, but just 2 times bigger because why not? I think the feeling I want to capture with this build is just the adventure but stable vibe of a nether portal. So I will start off by using primarily square with a bit of circles in it because I want this to feel sturdy but also blends with the mountain range around it. And let me just speed this up and use the magic replay mod to make it quicker, you know, the usual fucking build tutorial shit. And for the guard, I will just use a combination of squares and some circle because I want it to blend more to the sky. But this build doesn't look quite menacing enough, so I'm gonna add these spiky triangular shapes to the side of the build. And just as a final finishing touch, I think a big problem with my first couple designs is that it's missing the magical vibe of the portal. So then for this one, I will add some shockwaves and like these circles around the build to add a more mystique feeling to it. And here we are. This is the final product, and it's not bad, honestly. And if you compare this to the original one, you can see that it's a pretty big difference. So, you know, just by thinking and planning ahead, you can make your viewer apprehend and remember the design of the build much more easily by connecting them to a certain emotion or a certain symbol within our culture. And lastly, I just want to say that I'm sorry for not making an actual tutorial. But I think too much people just focus on copying and pasting other people's build. I think Minecraft is more than just a video game. It's a way to express your creativity, your ideas. And this video's purpose is so that you can be better at expressing those by creating arts for art's sake. And maybe one day, you can create your own nether portal sword.